I'm John Hart, the co-founder of C3 Solutions and the editor of our news magazine, C3. Today, we're very honored to be joined by U.S. Representative Victoria Spartz, who has represented Indiana's 5th Congressional District since 2021. She serves on the Judiciary and Education and Labor Committees. Congresswoman, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for taking the time. So I think one thing that's really fascinating about you and your story is that I believe you're the only member of Congress who was born in the Soviet Union. Is that correct?
That's right. And that's right. And I think, sometimes we forget that country doesn't exist anymore, but I did. I was born in Soviet Republic of Ukraine, and it was the Soviet Union.
That's really fascinating. So I think that's important to note because we live in this time when there are a lot of voices on really both sides that kind of idealize totalitarian, authoritarian states. And maybe you could just reflect on, as you look back at your life and history, are you concerned about sort of the socialist element in the United States and the West? And what do you wish your colleagues could see and understand that you grew up and witnessed growing up in the Soviet Union?
Well, I guess I'm concerned now that I became crazy enough to become a politician, but that really, truly breaks my heart, to see what's happening. And listen, I'm 45 years old, and I'm thinking, like, in my 45 years old, I grew up under socialism. I've seen what happens when the system fails, because it's only a matter of time. In socialism, it's a very oppressive system because it always has, political elites on top, and then everyone else equally poor. And then what became mob rule. I mean, 90s were terrible. This is very anarchy and mob rule. In most former Soviet republics, cannot get it back. You see all of the fights and battles. It's very, very difficult. They're going through bloodshed. Ukraine been doing for 30 years, still cannot get freedoms back. And then, I came, I was this young, idealistic person in some ways, read from Alexis de Tocqueville and Founding Fathers and a lot of, freedom, economics of freedoms and Smith and Hayek. And I was very inspired by these ideas, and then I came to the United States and I was like, oh my gosh, a lot of things that resemble, we build in socialism, we have Marxist ideologies that students at colleges promote. I'm like, do they realize how many people died from these ideologies? What did it lead to? So it's like a full circle. Now we're building socialism. I'm like, I can tell you what is going to be next, and it's not going to be pretty. And I don't think most Americans wanted to realize that. But unfortunately, this idea sells. This idea has been sold to many people, and sometimes it's too late. And we have to be very vigilant because a lot of trends in our country, it's a centralized power, centralized government control. That is really, according to Hayek, and it's true, that is really what socialism and communism are about.
Yeah, top-down command and control is the idea. Now, where were you when the Soviet Union actually collapsed? And were you living in Ukraine at that time?
Yeah. So I came in 2000. Soviet Union fell apart in 91. So I wasn't actually a young person at that time. I mean, but I went through all of this, brainwashing and pioneers and everything else. I remember very much. Actually, it was interesting. I was recently watching a movie about Chernobyl. I grew up, 70 kilometers, so it's very close from Chernobyl, and and it kind of reminded me. They talk about KGB, and that it's actually a good series. I think it's on HBO.
HBO,
But it's actually a good series, and reminded me the reality of the living at that time and KGB, and really thinking about what it is and how you felt all the time being watched. But sometimes you sit in these committees and start wondering about your Department of Justice and FBI here. And it's like, really, we've been watched by our government. Data is collected, analyzed, and you see a lot of things that happen even in my district, that injustice and political prosecutions that happen in our country. We just had unfortunate, court ruling yesterday, and what's happening with President Trump, and whether you hate him or love him, what is happening to him, it's un-American, it's really embarrassing, and it's a setback to our constitutional republic and the rule of law.
Well, there's obviously a lot to be upset about and disturbed about where we are in American democracy. But when you think back to that era and period of time, in the Soviet Union. A year before the Soviet Union collapsed, did you think it was possible for that to happen, or were you surprised?
Well, I think, most people, when you live in countries like that, you don't get access, to real information, so you have a lot of propaganda. So they've been always telling, so how great and how evil all of this capital is and how great. So you don't even realize what is happening. There are some people that, or you always kind of suspicious, and Chernobyl was very, I think it made a lot of damage to internally, because a lot of people realized how they were lied to, how people, and that's what all about the system. If West wouldn't really, if radiation could have stayed within the country, they would kill all of the people, because it's all statistics, people would have never even known. And people start questioning where, millions of people were exposed to radiation, where people in Germany were closing windows and were told not to get out in Frankfurt, Germany. But people 70 kilometers or 30 kilometers from reactor or visibility of reactor were going to school. Kids were going to school. They had like May 1st labor demonstration. People were falling down and fainting during that time, and the government didn't care, didn't say anything. So I think it was a lot of already, that really was a huge damage to the system, where people start really questioning that, with a lot of combinations, including, financial and energy policies that United States really specifically, implemented to really weaken Soviet Union and show what the system is. And I think that was actually a big difference it made, because the systems are financially unstable and incapable unless West subsidizes them. And I think Americans rightly said enough is enough. We're not going to be subsidizing bad behaviors, and unfortunately will be not as good recently in some of our foreign policies.
Right. Well, that's a great setup, because I want to talk about energy and climate policy, and as I mentioned, I think before we started the recording. So I lived in former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. I did a democracy building project there in the early 2000s with a Reagan advisor who started the National Endowment for Democracy, and Walt Raymond was his name. And I looked at some of his declassified memos. And to your point about energy policy, one thing that he observed and he wrote in the 1980s was, we should use the energy debate and environmental debate to contrast the cleanliness of the West with the bad outcomes of the authoritarian, totalitarian Soviet states, and that we should best communicate to younger people to highlight the benefits of capitalism. And that's part of the reason we did a report called Free Economies or Clean Economies, that shows that countries that embrace economic freedom are twice as clean as those that don't. And so as you discuss climate and energy policy with your constituents in Indiana's 5th district, how do they think about it? Do they, quote, care about climate change? What are they focused on? Do they think it's a hoax? Do they think it's a concern, or are they more concerned about inflation and other pocketbook issues?
Well, I think right now, people is truly, we have some, economic policy and, inflation and border security that are very harmful to a lot of Americans, and destructive for people, low income, middle class, and it's a huge problem. And I think people see that, I am an accountant and I understand how the numbers are calculated, but real inflation, what's happening is it's this highly regressive tax, and it's really hurtful to a lot of people in my district. And, so I think people are more concerned with that. But I think, Republicans actually need to do a better job to really communicate our energy policy, because we allow energy politics that is terrible to win, and in the minds of some, especially young people, that have been lied to. What is happening right now, if you think about it, listen, you don't have to, just some common sense. You go to the third world countries, you go on a tour somewhere, you see how they dump sewer directly into rivers, how you see they don't care about pollution or people are going to be killed. I think this is common sense. You understand when these industries are moving, to countries with corruption and totalitarian governments, they don't care about the environment. And we cannot just think like, oh, we're going to move everything to China and we're going to build a wall from China and atmosphere and ocean. They pollute in the same ocean, and they pollute in the same atmosphere. So actually net effect of pollution is going to be much higher if we believe that Earth, we cannot separate us on this Earth, you know. So I think it's really stupid that we incentivize in these behaviors instead of looking how we can be innovative and work with the industry here, because any industry here will be way more environmentally clean and friendly than in a lot of other countries. You can just pay a bribe to any politician there and do whatever you want and pollute whatever you want and use a slave pretty much labor to work for you, pay nothing. And that's what happening around the world right now. And you've seen that we've been destroying our energy industry, but then we polluters like China increasing their coal production, which is not a clean coal, you know, and everything what's happening is actually destabilizing. That's why we have a lot of wars, because countries like Russia, China, and Iran now making a lot of money that they can, you know, finance bloodshed and with this instability by, you know, it allows to have high energy prices. And this is really our fault, because we do not have a smart energy policies, but we need to win in the hearts and minds of a lot of American people and actually discuss these energy policies, because I think as a Republicans, I think we do a terrible job. And a lot of these young people, if we would communicate better, they wouldn't be probably brainwashed by utopian lies.
Well, so how would you define what should that message be, and what does smart energy policy look like if you could wave the wand and enact that?
Well, listen, it's common sense. I mean, it's like we have right now, like Europe has this schizophrenic energy policy. They were talking. I'll just give you an example. I'm a commissioner for Helsinki Commissions at the Organization Security Cooperation in Europe. So I'm spending sometimes few days in Europe. I'm ready to pull my hairs out, you know, just how terrible. They're talking like, we are going to, you know, like Germans and all these people in the EU, we are going to replace Russian gas in 3 years with renewables. I'm like, you have 80% dependency on Russian gas. Enough renewables there. You cannot even do it. I mean, you're talking just crazy stupid. I mean, it's unreasonable, it's unfeasible. I mean, it's just stupid, okay? I don't know. So there is a common sense. There are some, you know, we want to have innovative technology. We want to make sure that we have good, a lot of opportunities in nuclear energies. There are some economics, you know, you probably can have good solar production in Arizona, maybe wind production in Iowa. You need to look at how you can have policy and better transmission lines, how you make sure that you don't subsidize bad behaviors, but allow innovation to thrive and happen. There is, you know, geothermal, and there are a lot of opportunities on all type of energy and innovative. I think, you know, I mean, we have to probably have a, you know, fusion and all of these different things. And, you know, there are, maybe we'll be powered by the stars someday, who knows? But we want to do that. We want to promote innovation. But realistically, as of right now, to have stability of the grid is really natural gas. It's probably one of the best type of energy, you know, to be like realistic. You know, nuclear has a lot of opportunities, and there is a lot of innovation happening that is actually very clean energy. There are some stupid things that happened, but they were stupidly done things that didn't make sense, whether what's happened in Chernobyl, like failing country. So we have to start looking at that. But I think, you know, it needs to be all types of energy, and we have to really not to restrict and target money on one and another, because what's happening most of the time is just companies get rich, then they fail, get bankrupt, and at the end, we're subsidizing some very wealthy executives that just gave very healthy political contribution, but we're all paying for that, including the big cost, it's inflation. This is one of major, you know, factors that contributes to inflation.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that that reducing emissions, CO2 emissions, is a desirable goal. But we can do that by actually having energy abundance. We can do that by having more natural gas, because we do it much cleaner in the United States and the West than we do in Russia and China. And I think if I'm understanding what you're saying about Germany, is that Germany incentivized the West to become reliant on Russian natural gas, which they then used to finance their war against Ukraine. Is that correct?
Right, and that's really destabilized. It's a national security issue for them. And I think, you know, we did step up. We probably could have done more to to help them out, but they still need to think about sustainable sources. They just have, I mean, this is pretty stupid for the country. They, oh, we're going to get rid of nuclear energy. Now they say we're not going to be using natural gas, so what have they been using? What Germany is going to do? So I think they need to start being serious and realistic. What type of energy they can be using is going to hurt their industries, and it's really very destabilizing to be dependent on the countries. Russia understands it very well. If Germany is so dependent on them, Germany is going to be not very strong, and that's what the case was when they will start taking territories, advancing in Europe. When they took Crimea, Eastern Ukraine, Germany was silent. Now they kind of like, oh, this is getting pretty bad, but these dependencies on Russia made them, weak, in their national security front, until they're like, oh, this is really a problem. How could we become so dependent on them? Well, just bad policies, bad politicians, and unfortunately, it's hard to recover because these investments, in energy, you cannot overnight. A lot of politicians think you can just do with a light switch, change policy. It takes time to build infrastructure and invest in any type of energy. It cannot happen just right away. So I think these policies have very long-term effects, but very destabilizing. That's why these wars are happening, because right now we have, as a major energy producer, it could be even bigger producer, we have been very bad with policies to allow countries like Russia and Iran to make a lot of money, and some other countries that really shouldn't be, and finances a lot of bad wars.
Well, and Iran is a particularly bad actor because they fund terror proxies, which so there are very damaging ripple effects of all these policies. Just the last question is, a lot of your colleagues on the left, they accuse Republicans of viewing climate change as a hoax, of not taking it seriously. But do you think it's the case that some on the left, they talk about climate, but they're not really focused on reducing emissions? They're using the issue of climate to push unrelated socialist objectives that are designed to create more top-down command and control policies. Do your colleagues not see the disconnect there, that if you want to say you care about climate change, you need to be for policies that reduce emissions, which includes innovation and energy abundance?
Of course, and I think, listen, I mean, we all understand, listen, like Republicans, we all have children and everything. It's not like we want to have like all this pollution. This is such a lie, we want to, but we also want to make sure that we just don't subsidize few oligarchs over there that, making a lot of money on the subsidies, but at the end, they're investing in China, making a lot of money on dirty coal. Okay, so let's just be honest with that. And that's what Democrats are doing. They're giving big political contribution, with taxpayers' money to get it back in super PACs. And it's not becoming better for environment, and I don't think we've done as good of a job really exposing and seeing what's happening and what, investment banks like BlackRock, I think they even were criticized, by some of the honest liberals, okay, that they're actually not as clean as they're saying. They're all liars, and and I actually, listen, if you truly believe that everyone should be riding a bike and you riding a bike, I will respect it, even if I disagree with it, or at least at Bernie Sanders, I'm socialist, at least he's honest about that, so we'll have a debate. I respect it, but I hate hypocrites. They want to fly in the personal jets and have all these personal resorts and pollute like they want, but then want us, we the people. You drive a bike and you're going to walk and you're going to use this and this. I mean, it's truly tyrannical views and oppression, and they think they're somehow better and more elitist, and it's a very elitist view, and it's elitist view allow them to brainwash, especially a lot of young people, because we don't have very good educated kids now to educate them what's really happening, and they can be easily manipulated by TikToks of this world, and a lot of disinformation happening right now in social media and everywhere. So they cannot differentiate where the truth, which is not, which is actually a very danger for us as a country. But I think we have to start thinking, and also as a Republicans have a better energy policy, because we really have also a lot of politics on our side, and have a discussion, and not let us paint, like somehow we are like protectionists and why we're not. That is actually not true. I'm probably more involved in a variety of caucuses and way more Democrats to talk about energy, because in all types of energy, and being very open-minded, because innovation in abundance of energy, it will help to really empower a lot of innovation in other areas and help us with inflation and everything what's happening, and stability. It's a global stability. Energy security is actually a national security issue, and we cannot be stupid not looking at that. So hopefully we'll have a serious conversations about that. But it's very difficult in Washington, D.C. have conversation, especially in the election year. But hopefully we'll get through it this year.
Well, we're certainly doing the best we can, and we're grateful for you for taking a few minutes to visit with us, and we'll be following this closely. We'll love to have you back on to speak more truth into this conversation. And you can follow us at c3newsmag.com, and hope to have you on again soon.
Thank you.